Vampire Survivors is a 2022 released game. It's a roguelike minimalist game that is available on Mac, Windows, Xbox, and iOS. And they actually just ported it to Nintendo Switch not too long ago. It is not currently on PlayStation. Don't know if it's going to get there or not. However, you know I love roguelike games. I have never played one like this, where it's a finite amount of time you're going to play. So it's a bite-sized game, which obviously caters to that mobile market. But one that gives you such a high in terms of power curves that makes early, mid, and late game runs very distinctly different from each other. And the fact that you kind of know what you're going to be getting into and all you're limited to is some random choices makes the game a lot of fun. You probably heard me say minimalist at the beginning because this game only lets you move your character. There are no other commands. If you're playing on a keyboard, you're using your arrow keys or your WASD keys. If you're playing on a controller, you are only using the D-pad. And if you are playing on a phone, you're just swiping in the direction you want to go, and that's it. There's no attack, there's no jump, there's no special ability. Your character will automatically attack based on the weapon they have. And as you start to learn the various weapon systems, and as you start to learn the various ways in which synergies work and upgrades work, you will naturally start to get a feel for what weapons do what and how best to engage the billions of enemies you'll be fighting. And I showed at the beginning here, you see what a 1 minute play session looks like versus the final seconds of the game. And I can promise you that everything you saw and all the decisions that I made leading up from the beginning of that run until the end of the run were extremely deliberate, and they were chosen in such a way that gave me the best chance for success. And even though death comes knocking at the 30-minute mark and will kill you, although there is a way around that, and I'll get to that in a minute, even though you know what's going to happen, the idea is to gain as much money and upgrade the best you possibly can. Even though you know you're going to die, you want to get to the end. That's very important. And a game like this and all roguelike games really build around the idea of trial and error and really build around the idea of building up your character, not only for the current run, but trying to begin to unlock things to make subsequent runs easier or at least offer a bit of variety. So when you start, you're going to be limited to just a few characters to select from with a very small pool of weapons in which to select. As you go around and kill enemies and you pick up the experience crystals, you'll eventually level up and you'll be given a choice. Sometimes it's 3 items. Later on, if you upgrade a particular stat called luck, you can actually get a 4th. You'll even be able to get skips and banishes as well later on, but you're going to be limited to a few things. There's 2 types of slots, if you want to think of it that way. There's offensive abilities, and then there are offensive perks. So you might have weapons like a whip or a gun or a spawning mine card that moves left to right, or a beam of magical energy that moves vertically, or throwing axes. There are a lot of them, and I haven't even found them all. Then you also have choices between things like you move faster, or you're able to attract the experience orbs a little bit faster. The little crystals, you can grab them faster, or just general experience. They're worth more. Things like that. In between those 2 abilities, you will begin to kit out your character in a way that makes sense for that run. It is absolutely luck of the draw a lot of times, but once you start to get a pretty diverse weapon pool, depending on the starting ability of your character with their own unique abilities and perks and differences as well, like they move faster, or they have a naturally faster attack speed, or they double all the projectiles that are thrown, you will start to realize that certain character combinations work well together in particular levels, and it will force you to become a better, smarter player. The goal is to get to the end as you continue to fight harder enemies and the waves begin to change and the nonsense starts to pick up, you want to have a good balance between area of effect attacks plus more single target attacks. And hopefully you've built up your character in such a way that you're doing things that are giving you the best competitive edge. I can tell you that most of the time now, after playing for a significant amount of time and having a pretty large pool of characters and weapons to select from, most of the time I do get a victory now. However, earlier on, definitely not so much. There is going to be some grinding. I think that's expected in a roguelike, because after you die, all the gold that you earn, you get to keep, and you invest in different passive abilities that persist for all time. In addition, depending on certain challenges that are met, like survive 30 minutes in this particular map, or kill 200 enemies with this particular weapon, or do some unique thing on a particular map, you'll be given new heroes, and you can spend money to those gold coins to buy them and recruit them to your cause. Most of those new heroes come with a brand new weapon that, as you play with that character, they get added into the weapon pool, and that is how you begin to increase your weapons. Other ways to gain weapons, particular maps have unique drops that you have to go find. You actually have to unlock the ability to find a map. And then once you have a map, you'll be able to navigate to a particular direction of the level to pick up an ability or a skill to level it up, and then that gets added into your pool, and it progresses on and on and on. Now, what you're looking at here is somebody who's been playing for a while, who has a little bit more than half of the weapon pool and the abilities unlocked. There are still other characters and weapons out there, but I have a pretty good feel for what's available now. When I get a new weapon, it's always exciting to try out and to see how it can fit into my builds and into my preferred way of playing. And I've beaten this game many different times. Sometimes I'm investing more in massive area of attacks where I have to move in a certain pattern because, for example, the guns shoot in an X, so I have to keep moving diagonal to get the best firepower. I've had builds where all of my damage is front facing depending on which way my character is looking, and as long as I'm continuously walking forward, I'm able to cut down enemies rapidly. I've also had builds where frequently the entire map will completely delete. It's called the pentagram. It will kill every enemy on the map, and that will allow me to collect treasures, and basically I have to walk around and wait until that recharges. So I'm constantly doing zigzags and figure eights, not really engaging in direct combat, and then I get this big blast of energy that clears the map, and I'm able to level up in chunks at a time. Some enemies have that glowing ability around them. Those are like legendary or unique enemies. Those enemies will typically drop a treasure chest that gives you an additional perk or an additional ability to, kind of like a free level. If you've completely leveled out a weapon, say your whip, after you've completely leveled it out, when you pick up one of those treasures, it will modify that into kind of its like final form. And it will do some crazy amount of damage. And the best runs I've had is forcing myself only to select a few weapons such that I'm guaranteed to level them up quicker so that I can get to that final form quicker and I'm able to do insane amount of damage. And then additionally, there are some weapons that need to be morphed between two other weapons. There's some birds that fly around that will, in a clockwise or a counterclockwise pattern, automatically attack enemies. Leveling up both of those birds to max level will then grant you yet a new bird who does something entirely different. So there are ways to level up there as well. What I'm getting at is this game is always rewarding you. You're always getting some progression, whether it's just in playing and just getting some coins to level up your passives for the next run to make it easier, or to unlock new characters that have weapons, or to try some ridiculous builds that are going to allow you to play the game very different than you've played it before. Every time you play this game, there is some sense of satisfaction. And the fact that it is gated to 30 minutes by, fighting death at the end. And as I was saying, talking about all these different weapons, there are weapons to actually kill death as well. But gating it that you're kind of limited to that finite amount of time to play really does make this bite size, and it does make it fun. It's not as overwhelming. It's not as platform-based or intensive as some of the other roguelikes that I've played, like Rogue Legacy is a perfect example. You could have the best build in the planet in Rogue Legacy, but if you're not twitchy with your jumps and your controls, and you're not jumping and hitting your special attacks at the right time, you will fail. In a game like this, it really comes down to just moving and basic decisions and learning what synergies work together. And for that reason, I think it's incredibly accessible to people who haven't played roguelike games before. That hordes of monsters are coming. That's it. You've seen the entire game loop 5 seconds into the game. Yes, there are some enemies that throw you for a challenge. Yes, there are some levels that have some unique modifiers to them, like enemies will chase you that are invincible, that they can't be killed, or enemies will put down some sort of barrier that you have to avoid. But for the most part, you're basically just leveling up and trying to, just kill enemies as fast as possible, collect the loot, in this case, either the gold or the orbs, reinvest in your character, and kill things faster, and not only find a way to just survive, but eventually find a way to thrive, in which you're able to be even more aggressive, to earn even more money, even faster. And that is a very, very, very addicting game loop. There are some DLCs that came out. I've bought them. They're just kind of loaded into my game, which gives additional maps and additional players, things like that to play as well. You don't need to get into those if you don't want to. There are the DLCs are like $2 or $3 each. This game is actually free to play if you play it on mobile, but it does come with some sort of advertisement. I've only ever checked it out on Game Pass. My friend Wes came over and got me addicted to it. And as a result of playing it, I did buy it. So I own it on computer. It is cross progression and with the Xbox. I like to play on the controller personally, but using the keyboard, especially for some of these recordings, are great. If you do have ultra wide, as like what you're looking at now, you do get a little bit more vision, but it really doesn't matter because enemies are going to be pouring constantly from every single direction all the time. So getting a little bit of extra horizontal visibility doesn't really radically change the way the game performs. And since it is a kind of like a low pixelated, kind of like low graphical experience, it's not like you're getting some ridiculous frame rates or whatever. I played it on the Xbox. It runs it just fine. It runs it on mobile just fine. There isn't a ton to it. They continue to add new DLC. They continue to add new content. And I believe they're actually working on an animated television series at some point in the future, which I have no idea what that would even look like. I do recommend this game. It's won a significant amount of awards. It's been nominated for just as many. It sits at a very, very high Metacritic score, and as far as I can tell, everybody feels that it's just a very fun experience to get into. It is absolutely simulating that idea of a slot machine. There's actually a slot machine in the game, but that constant dopamine hit of collecting crystals and getting that new level and the excitement of figuring out what you want to put towards your character to continue the progression, that is a natural kind of high in this game, and it works well. I have found myself playing this game, 2 or 3 runs a day. I've played entire sessions of this where that's all I'll do for the night, and I've ended up playing 3 hours and I didn't even realize it. It is addicting. I'm glad, actually, there isn't cross-progression between my phone and my console, my Xbox ecosphere and the phone ecosphere. Although I think it'd probably play horribly on a phone because I'm not a big fan of using the touchscreen to control my character. At least it forces me to have to get up and go away for a while. But I do highly recommend this game if you are a fan of roguelikes, or if you want to see if you're a fan of them. This is an absolute one you have to check out. It's very cheap and or free to play. It's very simple to understand, and I think it's a great introduction to my favorite genre of roguelikes to kind of understand. So to me, this is a phenomenal gateway drug game, and I highly recommend it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.